Hello, my weird darlings and gents. I hope you've liked, subscribed, and have those wacky social medias all open and primed and ready. I am but the end of one of the bloodlines of a civilization of chaotic magic-using warriors known as the heroes. The Lost Children. Did you see that one, Peter? I just summarized something called a backstory. Maybe you could use like a sentence or two of that in your games instead of the usual sample of fuck and all. Yes, lads, let's welcome the new sock puppet that I intend to apologetically sneer at for the next few minutes. I'd unleash the Blaze Epic mannequins again, but in my last correspondence with him, he said that he knew I was going to hate him for his coming work, and I'm still deciding whether or not he was right. As for Peter, well, it's a long time coming from me to this jumble of pixels on the screen right now, as I sort of arrived in the middle of things, and he isn't exactly responsible for anything about it anymore. But I was there, I have a few things to say, some of which Yahtzee hasn't already said, in the real reviews, and all with the magical power of hindsight. In a time before Fable was an asymmetric multiplayer D&D session, a bunch of toys beating each other up, Magic the Gathering, or even this game, it was an adventure game. The original Fable had a post-medieval feel, kinda shit characters, and a bunch of adventure game puzzles that it outright ripped off from other games, although when you look at the history of Fable Zero, it has some elements of the modern franchise. The way I understand it, basically your master is desperate and needs you to find pieces of a key that will unlock an immortality device. It turns out that the device was made by a mysterious race of magic people, the magic people still exist, and your master is sort of a dick. You kill your master, wind up in death row, and the entire game was actually the main character writing the adventure down in a journal whilst in prison. Obviously, Peter's team at Lion's Frog or Bullhead or Blue Balls or whatever it was must have paid for the rights to use Fable as a title and started writing out a grand new adventure, and then the cycle began. Peter Malinix, pardon my poor French, Peter, was at the time known for overhead god games and tense action games such as Populous, Magic Carpet, Syndicate, and Black and White. Old St. Peter here had a habit of constantly overpromising features in interviews that were probably thrown out as a gag suggestion at a 3 a.m. meeting, all the while slagging off his last game as hot garbage, and soon anyone with an Xbox was either buzzing or laughing about a new game that simultaneously made any other action RPG at the time look like hot garbage, that also had dynamic rivals, a huge map, and foliage that actually grew in real time. And what we got was an action RPG that was just on the cusp of actually being an RPG. As I've gone on record as saying that an RPG is a game where you assign a role of some kind and play to that role, I'd say that the game does that, but very technically. As far as the gameplay goes, the first third you'll probably find a playstyle and stick to it, but then you can very easily grind your way to the master of everything before the end, and the area of effect devastation spells are severely overpowered. Alongside that, Fable 1 also has clothing and armor sets that actually affect gameplay. Yeah, I know. By today's standards, you'd be thinking, holy shit cakes! Effective armors in Fable? What an impressive idea, but it was actually par for the course at the time. These would assist the action RPG aspect, but only just. So armors could assist with damage threshold for brawny warrior types, ninja clothes could assist in speed and sneaking for agile types, different weapons would affect your damage output and style of combat, and wizard's robes would help you cosplay as Gruntilda or Gandalf the White. The thing is, equipment was never locked to one specialization, and it could help give the player an edge in any given situation. But that's not why most people played Fable. No, it wasn't for the action RPGing in the action RPG that everybody was eager to try out. It was also for the good versus evil gimmicks that affected the main character. If you chose to play the role of a good person, you'd look more wholesome. And if you chose to play the role of an evil cockhead, you'd look more like a pale-faced gothic hellspawn. A very novel idea, if it hadn't been nicked by Disney, the Looney Tunes, and every other cartoon medium known to man. Alongside the original game, there was a short novella's worth of text published by Lionshead that explained the backstory of the first and second games. According to Lionshead, there was a dimension called the Void where a bunch of evil things lived, and from the Void came the Night Queen and Jack of Blades. They ruled over the world until people developed magical powers of their own, and the first major archon of man killed their mortal vessels and threw them back to the Void. He was just about to throw Jack's sword in with them, but the sword spoke to the archon, swords having mouths and all, and it slowly corrupted him over time. Eventually, the archon hid the sword, went into hiding, and came back as some sort of wise lich that started a school called Hogwarts, the Heroes Guild. Also, there were giant mystical testicles made to help channel the power of Jack-Off's sword. There was a wizard that put his soul and power into a sword in order to close a void portal. A giant hero made a giant sword that only the strongest could wield. And some kid got turned into a murderous werewolf. And in the first game, or at least in the lost chapters, we do indeed get to meet the Archon, these gargantuan blue testicles, murderous werewolves, legendary swords, and biggest dickus himself. Now, to compare the Heroes Guild to Hogwarts, yachts, would entirely miss out on the opportunity to compare it to the centuries-old legends of the Assassins. It's fucking uncanny, actually. The main quest of Fable follows the old tale of Ibn Ta'ir and Hassan Isaba far closer than the Assassin's Creed ever did. Your village is attacked, you meet some guy who knew one of your parents, he then takes you to a small castle stronghold with people in white robes, you spend most of your early life in the castle learning to kill people, then over years of experience you become one of the best blades for hire in all the land, only to be capped off with an early promotion when you find out that, in the middle of an insanely difficult mission, the leader of the organization was actually evil and just fucking with you and the rest of the murder cult this entire time. Just change around a few details, add numerous fantasy side quests and a magical family subplot, and boom, that's the first Fable. Plus, whatever Yahtzee said on the subject. It wasn't the greatest RPG ever, and it was crimping a lot from The Legend of Zelda, but hey, I enjoyed it. But as soon as Fable 2 was announced, Molyneux went on another interview grape-stomping tour, decrying the last game as shit and propping up the new game with 3am features, and acting like everybody else was an asshole for noticing the lack of 3am features he'd promised before. Now say what you want about Peter. Well, yeah, we're kind of in the middle of doing that. Say what you want about him, at least he had some fucking vision. The first world he and his team made was immersive, with lots of memorable characters, and unlike many creators, he took the criticism his game received seriously. It's just that he obviously didn't understand a damn word past make it bigger. One of the taglines I remember for Fable 2 was, "Roads are for suckers." The world was much more detailed, and each of the maps were more like tiny sandboxes. Some were still like little circuit tracks that connected one load zone to another, but most of them were actually large explorable areas. Some even had unlockable paths for post-game shenanigans. The thing was, the complex visuals and assets used in each area made it easy for first-time players to get turned around. So to compensate for this, the camera was pulled further back and a magic breadcrumb trail was added as a constant "go here" command. The changes made the world easier to navigate, but also killed much of the personal tone the first game had established. And the combat! After the first game, everybody was whining that it was unbalanced and that magic was too overpowered in Fable 1. In Fable 2, they streamlined everything. Shooting, magic, and melee combat were all designated to a single button apiece, and all projectile attacks were auto-aimed, for the most part. How about the magic in combat? How'd they fix that? Now every spell has an overpowered area of effect. That's not the kind of imbalance that we were talking about, Peter. And clothing has been absolutely nerfed, too. We don't have any more useful sets of armor or lamps and lassies. Clothing still gives buffs to alignment and social interaction, propping up the role-play portion of things, but your damage resistance or sneaking ability or swiftness are totally dependent on your character's stats, and they all remain unaffected by what you're wearing. So it's entirely possible to be a ninja wearing a clunky Master Chief outfit, or a beefcake powerhouse that can soak up bullets. In her pants! Oh yeah, I forgot, the hero of Fable 2 can be a girl now, for the sake of customization and equal representation at best, and some weak-sauce gender commentary at the worst. One can only hear, "But you're supposed to be a sex symbol," so many times at the Forge before it becomes laughable, especially when I'm playing an overpowered run of the female hero. Well, I am sorry, Mr. So Orthodox, but when you're saying this to the shining, mystical, hulking demigoddess that has bedded several spouses, saved the world, and declared herself the next Archon and Queen, I really start thinking that I'm not the one with the problem. The lore was simplified as well, but not in the way that you'd think. None of the lore had been cut out, and many of the physical locations and Easter eggs still exist in Fable 2. It's just that the game doesn't hardly focus on that at all. Barely any flavor text is given to the game as to what was so important about these blue monkey testicles, or all the ancient ruins all over the place. It makes for a smoother experience for the noobs, but only people who played the first game are actually going to get most of them. And only people who read the online novella posted by Lionshead will get them all. And it's not like this would be fresh in everybody's memory. Even at the time, a whole quarter of a console generation had gone by, and Peter had gone out of his way to trash the previous game, meaning that only places like Hastings and EV Games or GameStop would be holding used copies. That would totally work on your brand new console, we promise, unless you got the one variation that doesn't do that. As for the story, while the current ruler is threatening to destroy the world as a whole, he was probably influenced by your great-aunt, and your great-aunt manipulates you to help stop the whole mess that she partially created. You collect 3 heroes to help you instead of crystals, and instead of an epic boss fight, an annoying pirate sniper shoots the bad guy in the brain. And behind the scenes, Archon British had been talking about gold acorns, meaningful multiplayer, and who knows what else. Fable 2 was later slagged off, and Fable 3 was later talked up as the next true RPG in the Fable series. Now listen to me carefully, whoever's developing Fable 4. No. If the tagline for Fable 2 was, "Roads are for suckers," then the tagline for Fable 3 was, "Roads are in again." It didn't matter what area you were in, no matter how large, spacious, or intricate. Every area besides the hub towns was either a labyrinth of halls or a single winding path from A to B, with little to no shortcuts. Sure, Fable 3 looked rather impressive, with a greater focus on the current story despite mentioning none of Fable 1 and only a tangent of Fable 2. Some new entity from the void called the Crawler is threatening the land of Aurora and Albion, and now you must once again help your great auntie save the world and fix her first half-assed attempt at saving it. But this time, instead of saving your mom or finding 3 heroes, you need to gain support for an underground war effort. But the whole thing was fiddly, over-complex in the worst ways, and even gimped its own good-evil roleplay mechanics by making it incredibly easy to accidentally be a dick. And yes, that bit where you make morality decisions as king or queen of Albion was a novel idea too. And how did they follow this up? With a canon installment that basically made some random schlub a hero. Never mind the prince or princess who would still be, alive. The other heroes, the royal cabinet united for the recent war effort, or the actual immortal wizard Scythe, and within we find out some brand new force calling itself the Corruptor is threatening to slither from the void, and it's literally all the royal great-aunt's fault. And it literally seems to have the same powers as the Crawler. Well, fuck it, Peter. How much of your original version was crammed up this thing's ass? And how much was ripped off from Fable 2 and 3? Something tells me I don't want to know. Maybe it's a good thing that you dropped the franchise with lion's breath, but was this really part of your vision? The same mind that stumbled upon the God game, gave us breakneck flight and combat, and helped to orchestrate a tactics-based sci-fi Gestapo? The same mind that bore a cartoonish fantasy of old-world magic and meaningful if simple characters in Old Albion? That was the same mind that said, fuck it, let's do the same thing, but refine what everybody's been whining about? 3 times over? I don't know. Something seems off. Still, thanks for visiting Peter's avatar. Tell him I'm looking forward to the business simulator, or the feature creep and inevitable 3 a.m. features that you'll have to walk back later, and the 4th game coming out. What on earth could I say, Microsoft? A calamitous event is on the horizon, and instead of basing an adventure on it, you're just threatening to rip off Nier. Wiping the slate clean is an excellent idea, but doing it to such a frightening degree makes me wonder why you called it Fable at all, and not say, just fishing around for anything, Fable Cataclysm.